right, great. Thank you so much, Lindsay. Welcome, everybody. My name is Callie Busby, and today we're going to be talking about leveling up your privacy on mobile devices. And before we get started, it is totally okay to interrupt me with a question by turning your mic on. And if you are a little bit more shy, which I tend to be, Lindsay has graciously volunteered to watch the chat for us. So if you want to submit a question by chat, Lindsay can read it off to me. So now that we have that settled, we'll go over what I'm going to be talking about today. To start off with, I have a few brief slides on why privacy matters to me, and but more and more people are aware of privacy concerns, I think, and it's less of a convincing conversation these days than it was when I last gave this presentation, which was only in like 2018. And then we'll get down to the nitty gritty. There's lots of areas where you could be giving up data without intending to do so. So we're going to talk about different apps that you could choose that help protect your data and different techniques that I use daily to keep my data out of advertisers' hands. And then we're going to talk a little bit about the future of data privacy. Apple has been talking about a new feature that has really got app developers everywhere around the globe scrambling to implement new advertising solutions. So it's going to be a fun conversation, I hope. So let's jump into it. Oh, maybe. There we go. So why privacy is important to me. I have just like a couple bullet points here, and I'll go more in depth in a few of them. So me personally, I'm worried about the prevalence of authoritarians using data collection to kind of oppress their citizens. It doesn't happen as much in the United States, but it's definitely something I worry about for the future. Radicalizing individuals through customized results and recommendation. Apple CEO Tim Cook was speaking at a privacy conference this year in early January, and he cited multiple times of, the concern that recommending political groups to keep people engaged on a social media platform is radicalizing people and hurting our democracy. We have personalized pricing or price discrimination. This one I just recently learned, so it's interesting. It's kind of a well-kept industry secret for e-commerce sites. And then the last one, denial of employment or services based on personal data. Like if someone were to find out I'd been searching for a unique genetic disease and they decide, oh, we don't want to hire this person because their insurance premium would be too high. That's more in the future as well. I don't have like explicit examples or proof that this is happening now, but it's something that keeps me awake at night. The other one that's probably more relevant to us, which is price discrimination. So 64% of adults thought it was illegal for e-commerce sites to charge different prices for the same item to different customers. And even I thought that. I was like, what? No, they can't do that. But it turns out that's not true at all. It's only illegal if you're basing your price off of a protected class, such as race or gender. And the example I saw in the article was very interesting, where a woman's like, well, what if my mom is messaging me on WhatsApp and is like, when are you coming home to visit? You need to buy your plane ticket. And then that information gets to a ticket purchasing website like Hotwire, and Hotwire is like, oh, well, this person really needs that ticket, so we know we can charge them a higher price. So this is another reason I'm motivated to keep my browsing history and data out of the hands of advertisers and e-commerce sites. So now we get into the good stuff, like how do we avoid some of this? And a quick disclaimer, as much as I think it's important for us to be responsible for ourselves and our own content, I know that there are people who don't have that luxury. Like I have a friend with disabilities, and sometimes she just needs some of the features that are inherently not good for your privacy. So I think it's on all of us to collectively demand better privacy options, because once consumers get the option to, and then they're made aware of the types of privacy they have available to them, they overwhelmingly choose to make their browsing more private when they understand that they have a choice. So let's picture your phone. There's lots of different inputs because the phone has quite a few sensors and gyroscopes on it. So where could your personal data be leaking out from? You have touch. Everything that you enter into the keyboard, you want to make sure that can't be logged. For example, if you're using a messaging app, you might have the company that publishes the messaging app kind of snooping on your conversations to see what you're talking to your friends about, what TV shows, movies, what products you like. And there's also the fingerprint reader. Biometric data can be sent to Google Cloud, for example, services like that. So I typically set a PIN number on my phone. I don't like to have my fingerprints out there. So there's sight. Obviously, you want to make sure that your camera is only being used when you intend for it to be used. Your microphone, your location data, which can be collected from Wi-Fi, GPS, and mobile broadband. And mobile broadband is just like cell phone towers, like how you get data streaming to your phone when you're not in a Wi-Fi hotspot. Bluetooth, and then there are cookies on your browser. So we're going to go over a few of these leaky points. So the first piece of advice I recommend very strongly to you is don't use voice assistants ever under any circumstances. I actually developed an app for Alexa and Google Assistant, and it was like a really, I don't know, it was kind of an interesting place to work because I knew the devices, when we get out the test devices, that they're always listening to me, but then you forget and you just start talking about movies you like and such, and you're like, ah, dang it. So in general, I like to keep voice assistants off. Then the reason is the voice assistant is always listening, even when you haven't invoked it or asked it any questions, because it needs to listen for your invocation command. So as you're going along and talking, it's always listening, like, have they said my name yet? Do they want me to do something yet? So that information does get logged. And Apple actually got into a little bit of trouble with this with Siri when they were contracting out these recordings to another company, and like, we need you to listen to these recordings. That we thought that they said the Siri's invocation command, but they didn't. So we want you to listen to them and tell us how we can improve registering the invocation command. And so these like third-party employees were listening to private conversations where like somebody was at a doctor's appointment, they were talking to their doctor about their health, or someone was repeating an address while Siri thought that they were trying to talk to them when they actually weren't. So there's some scrutiny from the public when this was brought by a whistleblower. And in the end, Apple apologized and they made some changes to the way that they handle this, but they kind of went right back to it. Like they haven't significantly changed Siri due to this public scrutiny that they received, and they've won their various court cases. So if you want to know more about that, here's the article. And then we can talk about app settings. This one is pretty straightforward. Before you download an app on your phone, it's good to check what data it tries to collect from you, and that's true for Android and iPhone. You can usually see like, okay, what kind of services is this going to ask for? This is a screenshot of my older phone that had Amazon Shopping on it. And I actually don't use Amazon Shopping on my phone anymore because I don't like the amount of data that they try to collect on people. So I typically use my computer when I order something from Amazon, just so I have a little bit better control over what's going on using the browser than when I'm using a phone app. So the first thing is to just abstain from apps that you don't necessarily need, but you know, they might be convenient for whatever reason. I typically use my computer and I order online from a website rather than using an app. And then when you decide that you do need an app, because I enjoy using my phone for fun things, so I have like a library app, and I do have Spotify on my phone. But I'm kind of going back and forth of whether I want to turn Spotify off, like uninstall Spotify. But if you turn off the individual access permissions to things like your camera and your contacts, your location, does it degrade the service that you're getting from the app to the point where it's unusable, or can you still use it? So I recommend, if you're bored and, I don't know, waiting in line or whatever, you can just scroll through your app settings and make sure things that ought not have access to your camera and your various other sensors be turned off. Now we can talk about mobile browsers. As a general rule of thumb, I avoid things that are built by Google. So I would avoid using Google Chrome for mobile browsing, and in general, I don't use Chrome for really anything. And don't use the Google search engine. Google's pretty notorious for trying to track every aspect of your life. So when I want to search the internet for something, I use DuckDuckGo, which is a privacy-focused search engine. And they actually make a browser for Android and iOS, so you can completely surf the internet from DuckDuckGo and not use something like Chrome if you want to look on the internet for something. Another good option is Brave browser. So if you love some kind of Google Chrome extension, but you want to avoid giving Google your surfing history and your search history, you can try Brave. Brave actually is built off of Chrome, so you can use Chrome extensions without your data going to Google servers. So that I use that when I'm browsing on my laptop versus my phone. But they also have mobile apps that you can check out. Then we get to talk about web cookies. So what is a cookie? It's basically data that's sent from a web server to your phone, and it kind of reminds the web server like where you're at. So when I log into Amazon.com, it puts a cookie on my browser, and it's like, okay, this person's logged in as Callie, and here are the items that are in her cart right now. So it's basically just a little package of data to tell you what you've been doing on a website. Almost every website that you visit has a cookie policy. You've probably seen the like annoying little window popping up and it's like, we use cookies. Do you want to accept this or not? And they're quite opaque and hard to change. If like some of them have opt-out features, but they're hard to navigate through. And honestly, when I'm like checking on local news or something, it's like, I just want to get to the news part of this. So I'm going to exit out of this cookie policy and not bother with it. So the problem really comes in with cookies that are long-lived and they actually follow you around to other websites to track you. So Amazon puts a cookie on my browser and then I open another tab and I go to Etsy and then Amazon's like, oh, we can see that she's shopping on other platforms now and maybe we want to recommend our own like handcrafted products to get her back on our platform. So there are definitely cookies that will follow you around to different websites. And it's unclear which cookies are the helpful ones that like keep me logged into Amazon while I'm shopping versus the ones that are following me around to other websites and looking at my behavior as a consumer. And what I do to avoid cookies is sort of on the extreme end, but using my DuckDuckGo browser, I clear all history and cookies after every website that I visit. So let's say I go to BuzzFeed and I take a personality quiz because they're fun. I find out what kind of cereal I am. And then once I'm done with that, I just hit the like erase button and it erases all history, all cookies, everything with one tap. And then I'll open up a new tab and go to my news website and browse the news. So I make sure that there aren't any cookies sitting on my browser that can be tracked from site to site because I just clear out my cookies every couple minutes when I'm using the internet. I also like to use a VPN. We'll talk more about a VPN very soon, but it hides location data so websites don't know where exactly I'm reaching them from. So now we can talk about VPNs. So VPN stands for Virtual Private Network. It is a way to browse privately by like masking your location. So when you're on it, it hides what your real IP address and your real location is. So I buy a product called Proton VPN. So when a website like BuzzFeed tries to read my IP address and my location, the IP is somewhere on Proton VPN's network. It's not actually where I am in Columbus, Ohio. So it makes it much more difficult for websites to harvest where you are. And they can't collect the same kind of analytics that they'd be collecting if I was not browsing with my VPN turned on. You can also view content that's blocked by region or government censorship. In China, a lot of the web is censored and not available for citizens to view. So you can use a VPN to get around that. If you're a US consumer, you can see content that's region locked on Netflix, for example, if you want to watch like an Irish TV show when you're in the United States. So there's a little added benefit there. I don't typically use that feature to watch streaming apps though. Some of the downsides, it does slow down loading of websites, and I've also been banned from websites temporarily because they think I'm a bot, which is always funny. So I just open my VPN and I tell it to switch to a new server on the network, and then it lets me back in. But I have been banned for being suspected of being a robot. Free VPNs are likely to be tracking your browsing and your habits and selling them to advertisers anyway so that they can make money. So I prefer to pay for a VPN, and paid ones usually have better features to them. Like the Proton VPN that I use, I'm allowed to switch to like any server in any country on their network in the premium tier. So I can, it's really fine grained control too. So I can be on Chicago number 14 because it's the fastest connection, or like Chicago 49. Like I'm allowed to pick any server within their network, and it's fine for them. And then we'll talk about Tor browsing next. So what is Tor? Tor is an acronym for the Onion Routing Project, TOR. So this is a volunteer network of nodes that pass your messages around to make it difficult to trace the origin of a request. So if I turn on Tor and I go to a news website, it enters the system of volunteer nodes, and then it gets passed around to different nodes. And the node that receives it only knows about the last location it was at. It doesn't know any other points along the chain. So that way your location is pretty hard to detect. The hitch with this is that these nodes are volunteer. And I've seen blog posts that say like, well, there are people with nodes that are actually trying to harvest your data and figure out your location history. So, and I personally don't use Tor. I feel like I trust my VPN provider, so I don't bother adding this extra layer on top. And then another interesting thing is when you use Tor and a VPN together, Tor will hide your traffic from the VPN. So I trust my VPN provider, so I don't care. I don't think they're actually looking into my browsing habits and trying to sell them, because I already pay for the service, so they get revenue without ads. And then the VPN will hide the origin of the original request from Tor, so that way you're sort of doubly protected, where I'm on Chicago 13 in my VPN, and then I make a request to Tor. Tor will just assume like, oh, they're in Chicago, but that's not actually the case. So when you use them combination with each other, it brings out these kind of interesting double layer of security. But I think for like an average person who's just like wants to read a news article, it's probably not necessary, or I haven't found it necessary. And now we can talk about messaging and email apps. So I hate the idea that everything I typed can be logged by a service and sent off for advertisers to read. So I get into Facebook Messenger and I'm like, hey friends, I privately message my best friend. I'm like, I'm having a baby. And then Facebook logs that and they're like, oh yeah, time to start sending all the baby slings and all the products that go along with having an infant. It's time to start that targeted advertising. So to protect what you're typing out to your friends and family, I recommend using an app with end-to-end encryption. And what that basically means is only the device that sends the message and the receiving device can decode the message. Otherwise, whoever provides the service could be snooping on those messages. So iPhone iMessage is end-to-end encrypted, but that's only when the sender and the receiver have an iPhone. So if you're looking to be protected with a default app, iMessage is okay, but it depends on who you're talking to and if they have an iPhone. I use Telegram for messaging, and I actually regret it because after more privacy advocates have analyzed Telegram, it's like, well, they do offer end-to-end encryption, but it's not there by default. You have to do some extra steps to make sure that your chats are secret, and then you can have end-to-end encryption. And unfortunately, I got my two best friends who I talk to every day, I got them off Facebook Messenger to switch to Telegram, but there was some resistance to that. They're not very concerned about privacy, and they didn't like that I was trying to like force them onto a new platform. So there's definitely some friction there. And now I don't feel like I can say, hey, I want to switch to this new app that's end-to-end encrypted by default, because I know I will get some consternation from it. And then for email, I use Proton Mail, which is end-to-end encrypted by default, and I'm loving the service. They have a free tier, but I'm using premium, so I get my Proton Mail and I get more features on the VPN with a paid subscription. I've heard some buzz about Signal for instant messaging. So if you're looking for something end-to-end encrypted, a lot of privacy advocates are recommending Signal right now because it's end-to-end encrypted by default. So you don't have to worry about starting a chat and then realizing that Signal can read your messages because you forgot to turn it into a secret chat. And then some apps that privacy advocates say that you should be avoiding is WhatsApp, Facebook Messenger, Android Messenger, and Samsung Messenger. And these are messenger apps that are default on Android, are usually not something that you want. So I definitely recommend researching and starting with Signal, because I've heard lots of good things about Signal. Now we can talk about map apps. So to avoid having Google or Facebook know everywhere that I go, which I would not like, I use Apple Maps. They have better privacy protection. And if you don't have an Apple device and you still want to protect your habits of where you're going, DuckDuckGo also has a direction service that uses the Apple Maps as a baseline. So you can visit DuckDuckGo search engine and type in where you want to go, and it will pop up directions that are based off the Apple Maps platform. Some very interesting information that I saw while I was researching for this talk. My favorite feature about Apple Maps seems like it has been removed or reconfigured. Basically, what I remember of the Apple Maps is it would actually fragment your route. So if I wanted to go from my house to a coffee shop, Apple Maps would take that and actually segment it into different like mini trips, and it would get scrambled. It would be sent to their servers and distributed. So it was impossible for Apple to figure out where I was going because they only had little segments of the route and it didn't have my name attached to it. So if the government came and was like, I want to know where Callie was on Saturday the 18th, Apple would say, we don't have any way of figuring that out, I'm sorry. Or we don't want to because we protect our customers, whatever the case may be. And then when I was reading their website today, as in last week, it seems like they've updated it for where, so here's the description of what it's doing now. Because your location can give away your identity, Maps converts the precise location where your search originated to a less exact location within 24 hours. And I'm disappointed in this change because to me it's a lot less concrete of like how this protects my privacy than the first one. So I'm kind of disappointed in the change, but I still use Apple Maps because it's the best mapping software that I know, and I haven't spent a lot of time researching other options since I found out about this last week. And now that we've gotten through all those auditing steps, and don't worry, we're going to review them at the end because I know it's a ton of information. But the future of data privacy I'm going to talk about briefly because I'm really excited about it. So Apple has an IDFA, and what does that mean? It means identifier for advertisers. And they are making changes to it, and it's got a lot of app companies very nervous. So the change that's coming, any new app installed must ask for permission to view your Apple advertising ID. So it's opt-in versus me trying to figure out, well, where is my IDFA and how do I say that I don't want it shared? This time it's actually opt-in where it's going to ask me, do you want to share this ID? And over pictured here is what it will look like. So it brings up this dialog box. Would you like permission? This app would like permission to track you across apps and websites owned by other companies. Your data will be used to deliver personalized ads to you, and you say allow it or no thank you. And when consumers are presented with this option, they almost always pick do not track. So this move has really got advertisers nervous because when people are given the opt-in choice for tracking, they usually say no. So this change is supposed to be coming within weeks, possibly days, in early spring of 2020. So I'm super excited to see what it will amount to, and Facebook has started publicly campaigning against Apple about this feature. So it's really stirred up and made waves throughout the mobile industry. Mobile ads are an $80 billion industry according to Forbes. And I recommend checking out Forbes for more information on this change because it's super interesting to people like me. So what Apple's solution is so that all advertisers don't just like suddenly ghost them and go to Google for their advertising. They have this SK ad network. And what it does, it allows advertisers to see if their campaign has worked without knowing who specifically has clicked on the ad. So it's trying to implement ads in a more private fashion, and there's lots of good information in that article, so I won't go too into detail, but basically instead of presenting like a list of like these iPhone users have clicked on your advertisement this month, it's going to say 400 people have clicked on your advertisement this month. So they're just trying to change the way your campaign success is reported to make it more private for the users who are interacting with your campaign. So that's the future, and I'm extremely excited for it. And now we'll do a quick review, and then we can take questions. So in summary, voice assistants, if you can, turn them off. Like I said, my friend has a disability, and she needs to have voice assistants enabled sometimes to be able to type things. So I understand if it's not something that you feel comfortable doing, and I'm definitely not trying to shame anybody that does use voice assistants, but for me, it's something I do not like having in my house or around me. So I keep voice assistants disabled at all times. Limit access for apps. Don't let them use your camera and your data storage or have access to every photo in your photo library unless it really needs that to function as an app. And delete apps that you aren't really using or that are kind of just cluttering up your phone, like, because if you don't need it, then that's one less security hole that's in your life if you decide to remove it. Replace Chrome browser, because Chrome is part of the Google ecosystem that tries to collect the maximum amount of information possible on you. And we went over how you can try to leverage Tor or a VPN to make your browsing more private. It keeps websites from knowing your exact location when you're just trying to read a news article or whatever. I prefer Apple Maps and DuckDuckGo for directions because they're more privacy oriented. For email and messaging, a good rule of thumb is to use end-to-end encryption. When browsing the web, it's good to clear your cookies frequently. That means you have to log into a website every time you visit, but I'm okay doing that as long as I keep those tracking cookies away from me. And replace Google products as much as you can because they're one of the big offenders of taking as much data from your online habits as possible. So that is my presentation. Let me know who has questions.